So let's get uncomfortable. Let's get uncomfortable.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Uncomfortable Leader podcast. In every episode, we explore the uncomfortable leadership moments that executives face at every stage of the business life cycle and at each stage of their career. We discuss how they navigated those moments and the lessons they've learned. Their stories and experience are informative, inspiring, and filled with practical advice. And that's where today's uncomfortable leader guest comes in, Steve Kapser. Steve is Chief Operating Officer of W.F. Whelan Company in Detroit. They're a full-service logistics, supply chain, and storage business that operates around the world. Steve, thanks for making time in your busy schedule to join us on the Uncomfortable Leader podcast. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Rick. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you having me on the podcast.
Well, it's good to have you here. And for the audience, today we're going to focus on topics around uncomfortable leadership moments with Steve. But we need to be transparent that Steve and I also are fraternity brothers from our days back at the University of Toledo. So we're going to talk a little business today, but we might accidentally squeeze in a little bit on college life along the way, just so we can have some fun in the podcast. Is that fair, Steve?
Absolutely.
Good deal. So, Steve, tell us a little bit about W.F. Whelan Company. What's happening with the business and just a little bit about it.
So we just celebrated a couple of weeks ago our 50th anniversary. The business has been in place, was started by Bill Whelan, and started at Detroit Metro Airport in the international terminal, servicing automotive customers, international freight. The business is growing significantly. We have two FTZs in Detroit, a 1.1 million square foot facility in Canton and a 500,000 square foot facility in Riverview, Michigan. And we're probably about 70% automotive. So we service approximately 30 international customers that ship into our facilities. And we perform every function that if they were manufacturing here in the United States and shipping to an automotive company, one of the OEMs, that they would perform. So we receive the releases from the customers, we prepare the shipments, we physically comply with their requirements, and then we send the ASNs. We also do follow-up, we'll do inspections. We do every function that they would do if they're here. We're based in the United States. And some customers have services that they perform or we perform, but for the most part, we're a full service provider in that realm. We also do inbound to manufacturing. So we have a couple customers that we support their assembly lines, one in Westland, one in Plymouth, Michigan, and we provide them with raw materials or purchased goods that are stored in our warehouse to support their production side. And then we do international shipping. We have approximately 3,000 partners worldwide through a couple different associations, and we arrange shipments around the globe on a daily basis. And then we also have within my group a material handling and storage solution provider, DR Storage Systems, that we bought 3 years ago that we've integrated into the business.
Wow, that's great. And listen, there's a lot in that business that I know under your leadership, things are evolving and acquisitions and that. And we'll get into some of that along the way, because I think a lot of what you do in your day job is going to be interesting to our audience, because you're facing uncomfortable leadership moments all day long. So I'm excited to get into some of those with you. So Steve, let me give you some background about the podcast. So as you know from your firsthand experience, we are just overwhelmed by uncomfortable leadership moments from internal changes that are made in our strategy, our operations, and our tactics. We're also overwhelmed by external uncomfortable leadership moments that are caused by changes in the economy, our customers, competitors, technology, regulations, and the environment and other things. We're just constantly hit with those. So these moments, as you know through your career, they're occurring at each stage of the business life cycle, from starting a new product to launching a company to restructuring through M&A, all the way across that life cycle. We're just constantly hit with this cycle of uncomfortable moments. So with that in mind, let's take a journey back in time. Let's go back to your first supervisory position or your first management position. And first off, what was that position? And then let's talk a little bit about uncomfortable leadership moments that you recall from back in the very beginning when you first started managing. So what was the first job you had there managing?
So I went to work for Yellow Freight on June 19th, 1989, which this year is my 35th year in the industry.
Okay.
And I would tell you that probably from an uncomfortable moment standpoint, my career started at a point where, TQM was being introduced, organic management styles, organizations were moving to those styles versus a mechanistic organization. So I can tell you that throughout my tenure at Yellow Freight, there was obviously a struggle between those people that were more mechanistic and those that were organic, and that entire transition actually was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, by the way, and probably still is going on after 35 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. But I would tell you that, basically on that Monday, I met a person that I work with today. We worked at 3 different locations. He was on the marketing and sales side. And I was on the operating side. He started out in operations. We worked together on the same crew, same shift. But we both chose to go the organic style, which, has served us well throughout our careers. It's been highly beneficial.
So talk a little bit about that. When you say the organic style, talk a little bit about what that means. What is that?
So, it's flipping the organizational chart upside down, and the people that are closest to the business actually run the business. And they know the processes better than anyone else, right? And it's engaging them in all facets of running the business, right? And you may tell them where to look, right? But you won't tell them what to see. And you allow people to, test the edges and basically learn from experience. You don't allow them to do something that would damage the organization, hurt the customer, things of that nature. But for the most part, you allow them to go out and run the business.
So versus a top-down type of an approach. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, we're, in mechanistic style, and we saw it even on our own crew at Yellow when I initially started, it was a directed style. I'm going to tell you what to do. You're going to go out and do it. Don't do anything else. Don't think for yourself, right? We don't want your heart. We don't want your mind. We just want your hands.
Right.
That was kind of the style.
So it's interesting. So you came out, you were in the bridge. You were at that time, it was shifting toward the organization. So you kind of were in that front end of it, kind of caught between two worlds, huh?
Yep. And we saw people that were organic managers and mechanistic managers, mechanistic leaders, organic leaders. And we had a leader that was kind of a visionary leader at our facility. And we decided that we were going to follow him, to the consternation of people on the other side.
Right. So you're at Yellow, and you're in this learning environment. Where did you go next? What type of company did you work for, and what role were you in there?
So at Yellow, I moved, through several positions. So I started as a corporate trainee. I was a supervisor within the organization. I applied to join the industrial engineering group, was accepted into the training program, went through the training, became an industrial engineer, senior industrial engineer, and then coordinator of industrial engineering for the Northeast Division, where I had industrial engineers reporting to me.
Right.
And pretty engaged with the leadership in Kansas City and network optimization, basically improving the efficiency, quality, safety of the business on a consistent basis.
So
Go ahead.
Talk about your academic background a little bit. Is your undergraduate degree in engineering or business?
So my undergraduate and graduate degrees are both in business and specifically in management. So I have a BBA and an MBA from the University of Toledo. And basically, I followed you, Rick. You started the graduate program. I became very interested, and ultimately, I did the same thing that you did.
Well, I hope you had better grades than I did. I really do.
You know, I don't think so, but I didn't have an industrial engineering background, but early on, we worked a weird shift, a 2-2-3 shift, right?
Right.
Whereas 2 on Monday, Tuesday, off Wednesday, Thursday, work Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then you flip and did the opposite the following week. And at the end of my shift week, so on Tuesdays, for example, I'd stay after, and computers were just really starting to explode in the
Right.
marketplace, and I would stay for a couple hours and learn how to use a computer. And then and I started to develop skills. At the same time, they started a quality improvement team, and I would come in on my off days to work with the quality improvement team, right, and attend meetings. And from that, I learned quite a bit. And then when the opportunity was posted, essentially I'd already been engaged. I had the resident skill sets. And at the same time, I understood operations and what drove productivity. And so then I started through the training to develop the engineering skills required to do the job.
Interesting. There's a bunch of lessons learned, I think, in what you've mentioned so far. One of them is staying after work. Did my day job or my night job, and then I stayed after, and I put extra hours in to learn other technical things and also to meet and learn other people. Is that fair? That seems like that's a consistent lesson learned in your career. You're putting that extra time in to learn new things.
Absolutely, and the gentleman, I won't mention his name, but that we worked together at 3 different locations. He used to laugh because I used to say things like, I don't think too much of a person doesn't work more than 60 hours a week, right? And I was
Right.
young at that time. But, it wasn't unusual for me to be there at 7 o'clock at night. And whenever I traveled, and I started traveling extensively, I would get there early in the morning and I would work 12, 13, 14 hours because I was on the road. And, no better time to do that stuff. And that's what I would do.
It's interesting that when I mentor young college students and they talk about wanting to be a CEO and lead a company one day, but then they talk about wanting to work 3 or 4 days a week, you can do that and you might become a CEO one day or a COO, but you're going to be competing against people like Steve Kapser who are working 14-hour days. So it's not that you need to work 14-hour days. The issue is if you aspire to lead, you're going to have to learn a lot. In order to do that, you're going to probably have to work twice as much as other people. I mean, that sounds like that's your experience as well.
Yeah, for the most part, I kind of think of it as, and I tell people this all the time, I would throw myself in the deep end and I'd be underwater and I'd be looking up and I could see the air, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I would just continue to do that and struggle to get out. But that's what my career was about, was, going and testing the edges and knowing what I didn't know and trying to learn it, right? And
Yep.
Be a resource for the organization I worked for.
What's interesting is you said testing the edges a few times here in our conversation. We're going to have to look that up because I think that might be the title of the book that you're going to write about your experience. Testing the edges. I like that. I think that's a cool term. It's a great book title. There might already be out there. We'll have to look it up. If it's not, you got to get out and grab it quick. That's a cool term.
I mean, and that's what you want to get your employees to do also, right? Is, you want them to gain new experiences and develop their skills. And so, you'll not only strive for that for yourself, I think, but you do for the people that work for you also.
Let me go back a little bit again. Reason I was asking about your undergrad degree and obviously said your MBA is you mentioned that you transitioned into engineering. Now, what was that like? Was that an internal program? Did you get a degree in engineering, or was it really more like learning the engineering side of Yellow?
So by the time I went into the department, I had pretty strong quality skills. Had gone for training in SPC. Had strong computer skills relative to the people I worked with. And so we used a SAS, a statistical application software package, and I was able to develop the skills needed to do that. I was able to quickly pick up how to do route designs and manipulate the data, facility layouts, account costing applications, which, there were material handling equations are all based on TMUs. If forklift travels at a certain speed, and so you learn to build and determine how much an account's going to cost before you ever use it. But at the same time, it's used for the standards that they use in costing once a business is actually running across the platform. I would tell you that at that time, I think I had 6 engineers. 5 of them were degreed engineers. From a process standpoint, certainly you want to develop the process, but there were pretty much standard processes, and I understood the standard processes pretty well. And I, as an industrial engineer, I'd done quite a few facility layouts and route designs and line haul bids and dock bids. So I understood the process. So I was taking what they already knew and based on their skills and extending that. So at Yellow, they also trained us in a couple of classes, or we took 2 classes, Performance Management 1, Performance Management 2, and then we took a class called Open Lock, which was, once again, 2 4-day sessions. And it was how to manage the performance management is how to manage organizations and people. And the Open Lock was selling skills, because it's important for industrial engineers. Obviously, you have operators who have operated the business for an extended period of time and think they know what's best. So that was actually more of the challenge, was getting people to believe that this young person who's in the industrial engineering department can actually help me to improve the business.
Right.
And so you run into a lot of uncomfortable situations in doing that. And just like any business, people buy based on the approval of others. So small successes become bigger successes. That I went to a location in Syracuse, New York, and I thought, God, do I have something on me that stinks? This person won't even talk to me, right? And then they talked to a person in Buffalo who ran the operation in Buffalo, and they talked about the things that I did that helped them improve their productivity in both the city operation and on the dock. And the person came back like on a Tuesday and like late Tuesday morning and asked me if I wanted to go to lunch. And all of a sudden, we were engaged, in moving forward with what we were doing. So those usually were the more uncomfortable moments, and my territory continued to expand. And so it was repeating that process over and over again.
So how long did you stay with Yellow?
I was with them for about 7 years.
And then what was the next transition for what type of business did you go into, and what type of leadership role?
So I went to work for Central Transport Link Logistics, the logistics arm, spent about a year and a half in their LTL group, less than truckload group. And then and basically was initially no direct reports, was considered a director, actually senior industrial engineer, and then director of engineering, and did things that would be consistent with what our network operations team for Yellow did in Kansas City, but developed larger solutions. Eventually went to work on the Link side and took over an operation that had probably 400 people in it. Supporting the Ford Motor Company was the inbound pool network that had 5 basically distribution centers and some production operations We also launched a rail to road transload operation for Kansas City Assembly while I was there, but gained pretty significant experience from an operational standpoint there.
Yeah, that's and it's some long days, it sounds like, too.
Yeah, all the time.
That's also a lesson learned, a consistent theme. Long days, long weekends, too, right? So, all right, so you're there. Where do you transition next? What's the next step in leadership for you?
So Ford did a bid, and the prior network really was a push network where the suppliers pushed the material to the plant. And so in the old environment, I had for Michigan Assembly, I had 14 doors, right? And we would send the material to them when they needed it. So today's generation that supports tomorrow's production would go there today, but then material that wasn't needed. And I actually had another door that was, so there was 12, 13, 14 doors. The last door was called the far out door. It was material that was shipped by suppliers that wasn't due for the next 14 days. So it was kind of a push network. Penske went and basically bid and proposed a pull network. The pull network would be scheduled. It would be every part every day. So we would go to all the suppliers, 3,000 suppliers nationwide. We would pick up scheduled routes at scheduled times. They would come into 10 basically distribution centers and be footprinted to the plant specific areas. So if there was, for example, chassis, there was a chassis trailer that went just to the chassis dock. There might be body, and it would go only to the body dock, but this material would all be loaded to where it needed to go, and it was all designated by day of production.
So I bet that had to be a great learning experience, just trying to solve that problem to figure it out.
When I first went there, I started out in premium transportation and inbound transportation. So we managed about 3,000 truckloads and about 550 milk runs a day that either went direct to the plants or came into the distribution centers and ultimately went to the plants. Eventually took over what was the Michigan area, but basically where you have people that are at the plants. I had 3 cross-dock facilities, 4 assembly plants, a couple stamping plants, and a chassis plant, and managed that business, which was essentially the Michigan area. Maumee stamping was included in that.
Right. What are some lessons you've learned as an executive on trying to balance out that work-life balance? I mean, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, my wife Sherry's an outstanding person. Rick, Sherry.
Yeah.
We have a son, Anthony. She was able to, work from home. She was a stay-at-home mother, which I think was just absolutely critical, right? And working hard and earning a solid income afforded us that opportunity to be able to create that environment. In addition to that, we basically have traveled throughout Europe as a family together. We'd go on a couple vacations a year to, pretty interesting locations, and, when you do those types of things, even though you're gone, when you're home, you're home. And at the same time, my wife was able to be there with my son growing up the whole time. And I think that was critical. And I think that, it's the people you have that work with you or for you, you want them to have the best life possible, right? And at the same time, you want them to have solid work-life balance. At the same time, the skills that you pick up, and I think about a gentleman that I worked for initially when I was in the industrial engineering department, Chuck Hammocky, and Chuck provided me with valuable experience, and it was how do you plan your day, how do you work your plan, right? And from a productivity standpoint, that helps significantly, and even in my personal life, to make myself available to do things, right? And it served the things that I learned. If I think about it, there were probably 4 or 5 people in my career that taught me things,
right?
And then other people that certainly contributed that helped me to get to the position where I am to develop like your personal operating system, right?
So talk about planning your day. What are the lessons you've learned in that?
Oh, okay, so right now I just flipped over to my calendar. My calendar is completely filled out for the day, right?
Right.
Including this, prep for this meeting. We had an 8 o'clock meeting, but my calendar basically is up to date all the time. I manage it in 15-minute increments, and I have a list of things, activities that I want to get done on a daily basis or that we're working towards. And essentially, that's what I do. But I do it in my personal life too. Since 2007, I basically had a daily plan of the things that I wanted to achieve on a daily basis. I basically, at the end of the year, sit down and do kind of a life assessment of, the things that are important, whether it's, health, family, friends, spirituality, work, and I go through and I rate myself and say, how did you do? Right. And then I say, next year, what do you want to do? And I do this, it works out pretty well because normally I'm off, during the Christmas holidays, and I'll lay that out. And then I'll go through and I'll lay out my plan and I manage them. I take and break it down from an annual to a monthly goal. Right. And then I take that and put that into my spreadsheet and I work it every day. So I got up this morning, and there were probably, let's say, 14 things that I wanted to make certain that I did, right? And it starts with me praying every morning, right? But there are things that you want to do every day, and if you don't track them, you're not going to do them. And if you want to, my dad's 93. If you want, if you don't plan to spend time with people, you won't. And
Right.
I know tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. I'll be on the golf course with my brothers, my dad that's 93, spending time with him.
Right.
Because that's what's important. Yeah.
So,
Yep.
Do you use any tools besides your Outlook calendar, tools like OneNote or note-taking tools or anything of that nature? Or are you to help organize yourself?
Not really. I mean, at this point in my career, it's probably more important to uh, have organization within, the business.
Right.
And so one of the things we did when I initially came here 5 years ago is we developed a mission statement. And then what's our 2031 vision? And what are our annual objectives? What are we trying to do to achieve those?
Right.
And then, we break them down into small tasks, and not everybody has the same task, and not everybody contributes to every goal, right? They
Right.
engage in the activity that, leads them. And then that's basically incorporated into our daily or our weekly staff meeting on Tuesdays is, how are we doing at achieving those goals? And then we have a quarterly team meeting and we have a quarterly board meeting. And, we have a list of things over the last 5 years that are pretty significant that we've achieved. I call them wins, right?
Mhm.
They're wins, things that we did. We were, several upgrades behind in our WMS, and we did it. We had some vulnerabilities, and we took care of them from a system standpoint. So there were things that needed to be done to improve the productivity of the business, right?
Right.
Help improve the sales effort, right? And basically document and follow the sales. There were things that we needed to do from a digital marketing standpoint to make people aware of our business, and at the same time to drive activity toward our webpage. And those were wins that we went out, wanted to do something, did it, and put it on the board as a win.
Right. Talk a little bit about your role at Whelan, and how long have you been there, and what is it like being the chief operating officer there, leading the business on a worldwide basis?
I've been here for 5 years, and the experience 5 years at the end of the month, and the experience has been great. Initially, just like throughout my career, there were opportunities to drive improvement in almost every business that I took over, whether it was at Penske or at SIVA. So when I came here, I started out initially assessing where the business was, who the players were, et cetera. And ultimately then, after about 4 months, of engaging with the team, engaging with leadership. We kind of laid out what the vision was, the mission statement, visions, strategies. That was in collaboration with the employees and our leadership. And then we started to develop the alignment, engage in the activity, and drive the improvements we needed to in almost every facet of the business. Ultimately, now we've achieved some measure of success, and certainly you can continue to drive that. But my goal over the balance of my career for the next probably 7 years is to develop the organization to succeed in the future, to develop the team, push up people, to essentially duplicate what I would have done if I would have been in charge in the future.
That succession plan, getting the organization to go beyond you.
Yep, developing the team. We do through great courses. Our team is doing 24 half-hour sessions on art of critical decision making, and so the entire team has access. A select team of 6 people are on the core team that go through and put together a weekly presentation, and we talk about decisions. In many cases that were made in businesses that were bad decisions and why they were, or good decisions and why they were good decisions, and what happens from a team dynamic in the decision-making process. And then ultimately, after that's done, we're going to do 24 half-hour sessions and transformational leadership. Change is important. A lot of change efforts fail, and it's important for the team to understand how to effectively change when it requires it.
Right. Very well said. So what's it like as a leader, the uncomfortable moments associated with becoming the main leader, being the chief operating officer with everything reporting to you? What was that like, and what is that like, and how are you managing those uncomfortable moments?
So I would tell you, whether it was at Penske or SIVA, at Whelan, you come into an organization that's a mature organization that has, in some cases, there may be a person that thought that they should have got the role that you got. You don't know who the players are, right? You know that there are problems out there, and basically you have to evaluate the team, and at the same time you have to start to understand the nature of the problems. And in some cases they play toward my strengths, which are financial management. And I had, whether it was Professor Phil Fink, I don't know if you remember him.
Yep.
Or Brian McCoyak. I reported to him at Penske, and he helped me to basically be able to look at a P&L, understand what's going on, basically identify what needed to be done very quickly, and then to start to drive those. And so one of my strengths, and often the problems that you face, are financial. And so, it's, the other attributes of the organization that you rely on to build around that, to drive that. And because that's obviously finance and accounting is just a small piece of the pie.
Right. Very true. Very true. So I just want you to know I'm grateful for your time. I'm grateful for the lessons you've taught us. And I want to ask one last question here. Give us a summary of lessons learned for you. If you were sharing back to a 25 or 6-year-old first-time supervisor manager, what are some great lessons that you've learned that you'd like to impart to them?
So, I think you come into the business world with an empty toolkit, or you have a few things that you think you have tools, but you really don't. And along the way, you start to deposit tools, things that you learn from other people, skills that you develop, right? And at the same time, you have to recognize the situations you're in and the amount of effort it's going to take to resolve. And at the same time, it's about the people, right? It's not about you. And you have to get the people to engage, run the business, help them to be better and better all the time. And at the same time, those people who you work with, work for, or who work for you, they're going to teach you things along the way. And it's important for you to be open, receptive, and engage in lifetime learning. Right. So I think, it's really about developing the tools, learning from other people, no matter who they are, right? Filling that toolkit and moving forward.
Yeah, well said. Very well said. Well, once again, I'm grateful for your time. I appreciate. I know you got a busy day ahead, so thank you for making the time and sharing your wisdom with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Rick. I appreciate the time.
Thanks. And that's it for this episode of the Uncomfortable Leader podcast. Now it's time to take control and calmly manage the cycle of uncomfortable leadership moments. So let's get uncomfortable. Are you ready to take control and calmly manage the cycle of uncomfortable leadership moments? Then let's schedule an assessment or a keynote speech at your next meeting or conference, a training workshop, or a coaching session. Go to uncomfortableleader.com and click on the link. It's time to take control of the uncomfortable leadership moments facing your company and department. Now let's get uncomfortable.